The charity gala was the biggest event of the year, filled with wealthy guests, sparkling lights, and quiet music playing in the background. Sophie stood near the entrance table, checking names off a guest list, her simple black dress a sharp contrast to the expensive gowns around her. She wasn't rich. She wasn't important. She was just an assistant hired for the night, trying to earn enough money to pay her small apartment's rent. She liked nights like this actually. Quiet, organized, predictable. After years of running from place to place, predictable felt like peace. "Excuse me," a deep voice said from behind her. Sophie turned and found herself looking up at a tall man in a perfectly fitted black suit. His eyes were sharp, calm, and slightly guarded, like he was used to studying people carefully before trusting them. Something about him felt different from the other guests. More controlled, more dangerous, though she couldn't explain why. "Yes, sir? How can I help you?" she asked politely. "I seem to have lost my invitation card," he said smoothly. "Though I suspect the woman at the front desk already knows exactly who I am." Sophie almost smiled. She recognized confidence like this, the kind that came from power, not arrogance. "And who exactly are you?" she asked, playing along. "Damon Reyes," he said simply. The name meant nothing to Sophie, though something in the way people around them subtly shifted, lowering their voices and stealing glances, told her this man was someone important. She quickly checked the list and found his name near the top, marked with a special note. VIP, handle personally. "Right this way, Mr. Reyes," she said, leading him inside. As the night went on, Sophie found herself crossing paths with Damon more than she expected. He wasn't like the other guests who mostly talked about money and business deals. He asked her simple questions instead: where she was from, what she liked to do outside of work, whether she actually enjoyed working events like this or just needed the money. "Both," Sophie admitted honestly, refilling his drink at one point during the evening. "I need the money, but I also like being useful. It's simple work, but at least I know what to expect." Damon studied her for a moment, something thoughtful in his gaze. "Simple work with no surprises," he repeated quietly. "That sounds like something someone chooses on purpose. Not just convenience." Sophie's smile faltered slightly, though she quickly recovered. "Maybe I just like routine," she said carefully, avoiding his eyes. She didn't notice the brief flicker of understanding cross Damon's face, the look of someone who recognized another person hiding something, because he himself understood the art of hiding secrets very well. As the gala reached its final hour, Sophie stepped outside for a moment of fresh air, exhausted after a long shift. The night was calm, the city lights glowing softly beyond the hotel gardens. She leaned against the railing, closing her eyes briefly, allowing herself a rare moment of peace. That's when she felt it, a presence nearby watching. She opened her eyes and scanned the shadows near the garden's edge. For a brief second, she thought she saw a figure standing perfectly still among the trees, staring directly at her. Her heart skipped, old fears rushing back instantly. "Sophie?" She jumped at the sound of Damon's voice behind her, quickly turning to see him stepping outside as well, his expression unreadable in the darkness. "Sorry," she said quickly, trying to steady her breathing. "I just needed some air." Damon studied her closely, noticing how pale she suddenly looked. "You seem scared," he said carefully. "Is everything all right?" Sophie forced a small smile. "I'm fine. Really?" She glanced back toward the garden, but the shadow was gone now, as if it had never been there at all. Maybe her mind was simply playing tricks on her, tired from another long night. "I should get back to work," she said, turning to head inside. "Sophie," Damon said again, stopping her gently. "If something's wrong, you can tell me." For a brief moment, Sophie considered telling this stranger, this powerful man she barely knew, about the fear that had followed her for years, about the reason she changed cities every few months, always careful, always alone. But old habits were hard to break. "Everything's fine," she repeated softly. "Thank you for asking." She walked back inside, leaving Damon standing alone in the quiet garden, his sharp eyes narrowing slightly as he glanced toward the same shadow she had been staring at earlier. Something about her fear felt familiar to him, the kind of fear he had seen many times in his own dangerous world. The gala ended late that night. Sophie finished her final tasks, said goodbye to her co-workers, and left through the back exit toward the quiet street where she usually caught her bus home. The street was empty, the night unusually silent. She never made it to the bus stop. The next morning, when Damon returned briefly to thank the event staff personally, a habit that surprised even his own men, he was told that Sophie hadn't shown up, and worse, no one had heard from her since the night before. Her phone was disconnected. Her small apartment was found completely empty, as if she had never lived there at all. Damon stood in the empty apartment, staring at the bare walls, an unfamiliar feeling rising inside him. Not just curiosity now but urgency and something dangerously close to fear. Whoever Sophie really was, wherever she had gone, Damon knew one thing with absolute certainty as he clenched his fists tightly. He was going to find her, no matter what it took, no matter how far he had to search. Damon stood in the middle of Sophie's empty apartment, his eyes scanning every corner. The place looked untouched, almost too clean, as if someone had carefully removed every trace of her life within hours. No photographs. No personal items. Nothing that could tell him who she really was. "Boss," one of his men, Marcus, said quietly from the doorway. "There's nothing here. It's like she erased herself." Damon's jaw tightened. "People don't disappear this perfectly by accident," he said. "Someone helped her vanish or someone forced her to." He walked toward the small kitchen counter, running his fingers along the edge, deep in thought. Sophie had seemed so simple the night before, a quiet event assistant with a soft smile and careful words. But now, standing in this eerily empty apartment, Damon realized just how much he had misjudged her. "Pull every camera feed from the street outside the hotel," Damon ordered. "I want to know exactly what happened to her after she left that back exit." Marcus nodded and quickly got to work, pulling out his phone to contact their tech team. Within an hour, they had gathered footage from nearby security cameras, piecing together Sophie's final movements from that night. The footage showed Sophie walking calmly toward the bus stop, checking her phone occasionally, unaware of anything unusual. Then halfway down the street, a dark van pulled up beside her. Two men stepped out quickly, grabbing her before she could react. Within seconds she was pulled into the van, and it disappeared into the night. Damon's fists clenched as he watched the grainy footage. "Enhance that license plate," he said sharply. After some careful digital work, the plate number came back registered to a shell company, one Damon immediately recognized. His stomach tightened with anger and dread. "This belongs to the Kovalenko family," Marcus said, confirming Damon's fear. "Rivals from years ago. I thought that conflict ended after the ceasefire." "Apparently not completely," Damon muttered, his voice cold with controlled fury. "But why Sophie? She's just an event worker. What could they possibly want with her?" That question nagged at him more than anything else. If this was simply an attempt to hurt him personally, there were easier, more direct ways to do it. Taking a random event assistant made no logical sense, unless Sophie wasn't as random as she appeared. Damon called for a deeper background check on Sophie, something more thorough than the basic staffing agency records. Hours later, his personal investigator, a sharp woman named Elise, returned with unsettling news. "Boss, there's a problem," Elise said, placing a folder on his desk. "Sophie Miller doesn't exist. Not officially anyway. The social security number on her employment records was issued only 2 years ago, with no prior history before that." Damon opened the folder, his eyes narrowing at the details inside. "A fake identity," he said quietly. "She's been hiding." "From what though?" Elise asked. "Or from whom?" Damon leaned back in his chair, processing everything. Sophie's fear in the garden the night before suddenly made much more sense now. She hadn't imagined that shadow watching her. She had recognized real danger, danger she had likely been running from for a long time. "Find out who she really was before she became Sophie Miller," Damon ordered. "I need her real name, her real history. Everything." While his team worked on uncovering Sophie's hidden past, Damon personally visited the Kovalenko family's known properties around the city, searching for any sign of where they might be holding her. His reputation alone opened many doors, though most conversations ended the same way: polite denials, false smiles, and no useful information. Late that night, frustrated and exhausted, Damon received an unexpected phone call. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, cold, and clearly enjoying the moment. "Looking for someone, Mr. Reyes?" the voice asked mockingly. Damon's grip tightened around his phone. "Where is she?" "Somewhere safe for now," the voice replied. "Consider this a message. Sophie's past has caught up to her, and unless you stay out of it, yours will too." "What do you want?" Damon demanded. "Stop searching," the voice warned simply. "Or the next call you get won't be a warning. It'll be worse." The call ended abruptly, leaving Damon staring at his phone in frustrated silence. Marcus, standing nearby, watched his boss carefully. "They're serious, boss," Marcus said cautiously. "Maybe we should consider?" "No," Damon interrupted sharply, his voice leaving no room for argument. I don't care whose past this is or how dangerous it becomes. I made a promise the moment I realized she was missing, and I intend to keep it. Marcus nodded slowly, recognizing the same determination he had seen in Damon during only the most serious moments of his career. Whatever secrets Sophie carried, whatever danger surrounded her disappearance, Damon was clearly prepared to face it head-on. Later that night, alone in his office, Damon received a final piece of information from Elise, a single old photograph, faded and worn, showing a much younger Sophie standing beside two other people. A man and woman who looked eerily similar to well-known figures from a powerful crime family Damon hadn't dealt with directly in years, but had heard whispered about in dangerous circles. Damon stared at the photograph for a long time, realization slowly dawning on him. Sophie wasn't just running from strangers. She was running from her own family, a family far more dangerous and complicated than Damon could have ever imagined. 3 years earlier, in a city far from where Damon now sat staring at an old photograph, a younger Sophie sat quietly in the corner of a large, dimly lit room, listening to her father argue loudly with two other men. Her real name back then was Isabel Ferreira, daughter of Anton Ferreira, a rising figure within one of the country's most feared crime families. Isabel had grown up surrounded by danger, though she never fully belonged to that world. While her father built his empire through fear and violence, Isabel spent her days quietly reading books, dreaming of a simple life far away from guns, threats, and constant tension. "You don't understand the risk," her father shouted at the men in the room. "If the Kovalenkos discover what we know, it will start a war neither side can win." Isabel didn't fully understand the details back then, only that her father held dangerous secrets, secrets powerful enough to destroy entire families if exposed. She learned later, much later, that her father had uncovered proof of betrayal within the Kovalenko family itself, evidence that could shift the balance of power completely. But secrets like that never stayed hidden for long. One night, when Isabel was barely 18, her family's home was attacked without warning. She remembered the sound of gunfire, the screams, the chaos of running through dark hallways as her father desperately tried to protect her, pushing her toward a hidden passage beneath their house. "Run, Isabel," he had said, his voice breaking with fear and finality. "Don't stop. Don't look back. Change your name, hide everything about who you are. Promise me." She had promised, tears streaming down her face as she left her father behind, the sound of gunfire echoing through the house as she escaped into the night. She never saw him again. She learned only weeks later, through quiet whispers among frightened relatives, that both her parents had been killed that night, victims of the very war her father had tried to prevent. From that moment, Isabel Ferreira ceased to exist. She became Sophie Miller, a woman with no past, careful never to trust anyone completely, always ready to disappear again if danger ever found her. Now, sitting tied to a chair in an unfamiliar warehouse, Sophie realized painfully that her past had finally caught up to her after years of careful hiding. The man who had been watching her at the gala stepped into the dim room, his face calm, almost sympathetic. "Isabel Ferreira," he said quietly. "It's been a long time." Sophie's body tensed at the sound of her true name, spoken aloud for the first time in years. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly despite her effort to remain calm. "My name is Viktor Kovalenko," the man said simply. "You might not remember me, but our families share a complicated history." Sophie's breath caught. Kovalenko. The very name her father had feared the night everything fell apart. "What do you want from me?" she asked carefully. "I don't know anything. I was just a child when my parents died." Victor studied her closely, his expression unreadable. "Perhaps," he said. "But your father hid something before he died, information valuable enough that certain people still believe you might know where it is, even if you don't realize it yourself." Sophie shook her head desperately. "I don't know anything about hidden information. I've spent years just trying to survive, trying to forget everything about that night." Victor sighed, seemingly almost disappointed. "Unfortunately, my associates won't easily believe that," he said. "Especially now that you've attracted the attention of someone as powerful as Damon Reyes." Sophie's heart sank further at the mention of Damon's name. "Leave him out of this," she said firmly. "He has nothing to do with any of this." "He does now," Victor replied calmly. "The moment he began searching for you, he became involved, whether either of you wanted that or not." Meanwhile, back in the city, Damon sat quietly in his office, staring at the aged photograph Elise had given him, pieces of Sophie's hidden past slowly coming together in his mind. He now understood the fear he'd seen in her eyes at the gala, understood the reason behind her guarded, careful nature. "She's the daughter of Anton Ferreira," Damon said quietly, mostly to himself. The one who disappeared after the massacre 3 years ago. Marcus, standing nearby, looked surprised. I remember hearing about that. It was brutal even by our standards. But everyone believed the entire family had died that night. Except her, Damon said grimly. She survived, changed her identity, and has been hiding ever since. He paused, anger rising steadily within him. And now the Kovalenkos have found her, believing she holds information from her father's death. Do you think she actually knows anything? Marcus asked carefully. Damon shook his head slowly. Doesn't matter what she knows. What matters is they believe she does, and that alone puts her life in serious danger. He stood up abruptly, determination hardening his expression completely. Gather every resource we have, he ordered. I don't care what it costs or what risks we take. We're finding the exact location where they're holding her, and we're getting her out immediately. Marcus nodded firmly, moving quickly to follow his boss's orders, sensing clearly that this had become far more personal to Damon than any previous conflict he had witnessed before. Back in the warehouse, Sophie sat alone again after Victor left the room, her mind racing frantically, trying to remember anything from her childhood that could possibly be the information they were searching for. She had spent years trying desperately to forget her past. Now, ironically, her survival depended entirely on remembering it. Damon's office had turned into a full command center overnight. Maps covered his desk, phones rang constantly, and his most trusted men moved in and out with updates every few minutes. Sleep had become unimportant. Only one thing mattered now: finding Sophie before the Kovalenkos decided she was no longer useful to them alive. Boss, we might have something, Elise said, walking in quickly with her laptop open. The van used to take Sophie was tracked through 3 different traffic cameras before it went dark near the old industrial district. Damon leaned over the screen, studying the route carefully. That area has been abandoned for years, he muttered. Perfect place to hide someone without drawing attention. There's more, Elise continued. I cross-referenced recent property purchases in that district. One warehouse was quietly bought 2 months ago through a shell company linked to Viktor Kovalenko. Damon's eyes narrowed with focus. That's where she is. Marcus stepped forward, his expression serious. Boss, if we move in carelessly, we risk her life even more. The Kovalenkos are expecting retaliation. They'll have guards, maybe traps. Damon nodded slowly, forcing himself to think strategically instead of emotionally, though every instinct inside him wanted to storm the building immediately. Then we do this carefully, he said. Quiet approach first. I want eyes on that warehouse within the hour, and I want a full layout of the building before we make any move. While his team worked quickly to gather intelligence, Damon allowed himself a brief, rare moment of vulnerability, sitting alone with his thoughts. He barely knew Sophie, only a single night of conversation, quiet smiles, and unexpected honesty. Yet something about her simplicity, her quiet strength despite clearly carrying heavy burdens, had affected him deeply, more than he wanted to admit even to himself. He thought about the promise he had made silently to himself the moment he learned she was missing. It wasn't simply pride or unfinished curiosity driving him now. It was something far more personal, something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a very long time. Meanwhile, deep inside the warehouse, Sophie sat quietly, exhausted both physically and emotionally from hours of questioning. Victor returned periodically, asking the same questions repeatedly, searching for any hidden memory that might reveal the location of her father's secret information. I've told you everything I remember, Sophie said wearily during his latest visit. I was a child. My father never shared business details with me. Victor studied her carefully, seemingly torn between suspicion and reluctant sympathy. Perhaps you're telling the truth, he admitted quietly. But my associates won't accept uncertainty. They want results, whether the information is real or not. And if I truly don't know anything? Sophie asked, her voice trembling slightly. What happens to me then? Victor's silence answered her question more clearly than words ever could. Later that night, hidden discreetly among the shadows outside the warehouse, Damon's men carefully mapped out security patterns, identifying guard rotations and possible entry points. Damon himself watched quietly from a distance, his sharp eyes scanning every detail, patience clashing constantly with urgency. 2 guards at the main entrance, changing every 20 minutes, Marcus reported quietly through their earpieces. Side entrance seems lightly guarded, but there's a camera positioned directly above it. Can we disable it without raising alarms? Damon asked quietly. Give me 5 minutes, Elise replied confidently, already working remotely to hack into the warehouse's basic security system. As tension mounted, Damon's phone buzzed unexpectedly. It was another anonymous call, presumably from the same man who had warned him earlier. "You didn't listen," the voice said calmly. "I'm almost impressed by your persistence, Mr. Reyes." "Let her go," Damon said firmly, controlling his anger carefully. "This ends now." "It ends when we get what we want," the voice replied coldly. "Consider this your final warning. Stay away, or the next time we speak, it'll be to arrange a funeral, not a rescue." The call ended abruptly, leaving Damon staring intensely into the darkness surrounding the warehouse. His jaw clenched tightly, patience wearing dangerously thin. "Boss," Elisa's voice came through his earpiece. "Cameras down. You're clear to move on the side entrance." Damon took a deep breath, steadying his resolve completely. "Move in. Quietly, carefully. No unnecessary violence unless absolutely required." His men nodded silently, moving swiftly and precisely toward the warehouse's side entrance, blending seamlessly into the shadows. Damon followed closely behind, his heart pounding with anticipation and controlled urgency. As they carefully entered the building, moving quietly through dimly lit corridors, Damon's senses sharpened instinctively, alert to every sound, every possible danger lurking nearby. Finally, after cautiously navigating several quiet hallways, they reached a heavy metal door, behind which faint voices could be heard. One clearly Victor's, calm and controlled, and another unmistakably Sophie's, trembling but resilient. Damon signaled his men to hold position, carefully positioning himself directly outside the door, his hand steady on his weapon, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He was close now, closer than he had been since this nightmare began. But he understood clearly that the next few moments would determine everything: Sophie's safety, her freedom, and quite possibly both of their futures together. Taking one final steadying breath, Damon gave the signal. It was time. The metal door burst open with a loud crash. Victor spun around in shock as Damon stepped inside, weapon raised, his men flooding in right behind him. For a brief second, nobody moved, the tension in the room thick enough to feel. "Damon Reyes," Victor said, recovering his calm quickly, though his eyes flickered with genuine surprise. "I underestimated how quickly you'd find this place." "Let her go," Damon said, his voice low and dangerous. "Now." Sophie, still tied to the chair, looked up at Damon with wide eyes, relief and disbelief crossing her exhausted face. "Damon," she whispered, her voice breaking slightly. Victor raised his hands slowly, stepping back carefully, clearly aware that his men were now outnumbered and outpositioned. "This doesn't have to end violently," he said carefully. "We simply want information. Nothing more." "She already told you she doesn't have it," Damon said firmly, moving toward Sophie while keeping his eyes locked on Victor. "Continuing to hold her here won't change that truth." Victor hesitated, clearly torn between his orders and the reality of the situation now unfolding in front of him. Slowly, reluctantly, he nodded to his men, signaling them to step back. Damon quickly moved to Sophie's side, carefully untying the ropes binding her wrists. "Are you hurt?" he asked quietly, his voice softer now, filled with genuine concern. "I'm okay," Sophie said, though her voice trembled from exhaustion and fear. "Just tired? Scared." "You're safe now," Damon reassured her gently, helping her stand carefully. But just as they turned to leave, sudden gunfire erupted from outside the warehouse, shattering the fragile calm instantly. Marcus's voice came through Damon's earpiece urgently. "Boss, we've got company. Kovalenko reinforcements just arrived, more men than we expected." Damon's body tensed immediately, instincts sharpening. "Get her out through the back," he ordered quickly, positioning himself protectively in front of Sophie. Victor, seizing the sudden chaos, tried to slip away quietly, but Damon caught his arm firmly. "This isn't over," Damon warned him coldly. "Tell your people this ends today one way or another." Victor nodded quickly, clearly unwilling to escalate further, and disappeared into the confusion outside. Damon guided Sophie carefully through the warehouse's back corridors, gunfire echoing loudly behind them as his men fought fiercely to hold off the sudden ambush. Sophie's legs felt weak, adrenaline and fear making every step difficult, but Damon's firm grip kept her steady and moving forward. "We're almost out," Damon reassured her, glancing back protectively as they approached a hidden exit. Suddenly, two armed men appeared directly ahead, blocking their path completely. Damon reacted instantly, pushing Sophie behind him protectively as gunfire erupted once again, dangerously close this time. He fought quickly and precisely, disarming one attacker while Marcus, arriving just in time, handled the second. "Go, go, go!" Marcus shouted urgently, covering their retreat as Damon pulled Sophie through the exit into the cool night air outside. They ran quickly toward a waiting car, bullets echoing distantly behind them as Damon's remaining men continued holding off the ambush. Finally reaching safety, Damon quickly ushered Sophie into the car, sliding in beside her as the vehicle sped away from the chaos. Breathing heavily, adrenaline slowly fading, Sophie turned to Damon, tears finally breaking free from her eyes. "Why?" she asked quietly, her voice trembling with emotion. "Why would you risk everything for me? You barely know me." Damon looked at her seriously, his usual guarded expression completely gone now, replaced by raw honesty. "Because the moment I realized you were missing, I understood clearly that I couldn't simply let you go," he said quietly. "I made a promise to myself that I would find you no matter what it took." Sophie shook her head slowly, guilt and fear evident in her expression. "You don't understand," she said softly. "My past, my family, it's dangerous, Damon. Being near me puts you at constant risk." "I don't care about the risk," Damon said firmly, taking her hand gently in his. "I care about you being safe. About you finally having a life free from constantly running and hiding." Sophie looked at him carefully, searching his eyes for any sign of doubt or hesitation, finding none. "They won't stop," she whispered. "Victor's people believe I know something valuable. Even if I don't, they'll keep hunting me." Damon's expression hardened with determination. "Then we end this permanently," he said firmly. "No more hiding, no more running. We find the truth about what your father hid, and we finish this conflict once and for all." Sophie hesitated, fear and exhaustion clear in her eyes, but something else too, a flicker of hope she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. "Together?" she asked quietly. Damon squeezed her hand gently, his voice steady and reassuring. "Together," he confirmed. As their car disappeared into the quiet city night, both of them understood clearly that although they had escaped immediate danger, the true battle for Sophie's freedom and their future together had only just begun. 2 days after the warehouse rescue, Sophie sat quietly in one of Damon's safe houses, finally able to rest without constantly looking over her shoulder. The safe house was simple but secure, hidden away in a quiet part of the city that few people knew existed. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to sleep peacefully through an entire night. Damon visited often, bringing updates on the search for her father's hidden information, though so far, his men had found nothing concrete. Sitting together one evening, Sophie finally decided to share something she had kept buried deep within her memory. "There's a place," she said quietly, staring at her hands. "My father used to take me there when I was young. A small cabin outside the city, away from everyone. I haven't thought about it in years, but if he hid something important somewhere only he would trust completely, it might be there." Damon listened carefully, hope rising cautiously within him. "Do you remember where exactly this cabin is?" Sophie nodded slowly, old memories resurfacing painfully but clearly. "I think so. It's been a long time, but I remember the road, the lake nearby. I could find it again." Damon immediately began planning quietly and carefully, aware that if this cabin truly held answers, Victor's people would likely be searching for the same location. Secrecy was essential. The next morning, Damon, Sophie, and a small trusted team drove quietly out of the city, taking careful indirect routes to avoid being followed. The journey was tense, filled with silence and quiet anticipation, though Sophie found comfort in Damon's steady presence beside her. After hours of careful driving, they finally arrived at a small weathered cabin nestled quietly beside a calm lake, surrounded by tall trees. Sophie stepped out slowly, memories flooding back as she looked around the peaceful, forgotten place. "This is it," she whispered softly. Inside, the cabin was simple, untouched by time, covered lightly in dust from years of abandonment. Sophie moved carefully through the small rooms, memories guiding her steps until she reached a hidden panel beneath the fireplace, something she vaguely remembered her father showing her once, long ago. With trembling hands she carefully opened the hidden compartment, revealing an old, sealed envelope inside. Damon watched quietly, giving her space as she carefully opened it, revealing detailed documents and photographs, evidence clearly showing deep corruption and betrayal within the Kovalenko family itself, proof powerful enough to shift the entire balance of power within the criminal world. "This is what they've been searching for," Damon said quietly, studying the documents carefully. "Proof that Victor's own family betrayed key allies years ago, information that could destroy their entire organization if exposed publicly." Sophie stared at the papers, overwhelmed by emotions she hadn't expected: relief, sadness, and finally, closure. "My father died protecting this," she whispered. "All these years, and it was hidden exactly where he always intended for it to be found." Damon gently took her hand, understanding clearly the weight of this moment for her. "This ends things," he said softly. "Once this becomes public, Victor's power collapses completely. There's no reason for him to continue hunting you." Sophie looked at him, uncertainty still lingering in her eyes. "And if he tries anyway?" "He won't," Damon reassured her firmly. "Not once he understands exposing this evidence means losing everything he has left." True to Damon's words, once the documents were carefully released to the right influential contacts within the criminal underworld, Victor's power crumbled rapidly. Faced with the collapse of his family's reputation and influence, Victor quietly withdrew his pursuit of Sophie entirely, understanding clearly that continuing to chase her now served no purpose. Weeks later, life slowly began to settle into something calmer, quieter, and safer for Sophie. She found herself, for the first time since childhood, truly free from the shadows of her past. One quiet afternoon, sitting together at a small cafe Sophie had once dreamed of visiting during her years of hiding, Damon watched her carefully, admiration and affection clear in his eyes. "You seem different," he said softly. "Lighter, somehow." Sophie smiled genuinely, something she hadn't done freely in years. "For the first time in a long time I actually feel safe," she admitted. "Free." Damon reached across the table, gently taking her hand in his. "I promised I'd find you," he said quietly. "But I never expected finding you would also mean finding something I didn't even realize I was searching for myself." Sophie's eyes softened, understanding completely what he meant. "And what's that?" she asked gently, though she already knew the answer. "A reason to want a different kind of life," Damon said honestly. "One built on trust rather than fear." Sophie squeezed his hand gently, tears of happiness rather than fear finally filling her eyes. "Then let's build that life together," she whispered softly. As the sun set gently over the quiet city, Damon and Sophie sat together, finally free from danger, finally free from the shadows of their past, ready to embrace whatever future awaited them, together, side by side, exactly as Damon had promised from the very beginning.